I never thought I'd become the victim of the very rules I once wrote. But life has a strange sense of humor, especially when your neighborhood has someone named Karen. My name is Jake Miller. I'm a software engineer living in Maple Grove Estates, a place that looks like paradise for people who worship order. Every lawn is trimmed with ruler precision, every fence stands exactly 1.2 meters high, no more, no less. And of course, everything is managed by the HOA, the Homeowners Association. 3 years ago, I served as the HOA president. Not because I volunteered, but because someone had to do it, and I can't stand disorder. During my term, I rewrote the HOA regulations, making them fair, logical, and not overly strict. I thought I did a good job, until Karen Thompson moved in. Karen was the kind of person you meet once and never forget. Around 50, curly blonde hair, always wearing oversized sunglasses, and constantly carrying a notepad. If a car parked an inch too far or a trash can stayed out 10 minutes too long, you could bet a violation notice would appear on your door the next morning. I didn't hate Karen, at least, not until that Monday morning. I walked outside, coffee in hand, ready for work. My old Ford pickup sat parked right in front of my house, same as always. But that morning, a yellow slip was tucked under the wiper, an HOA violation notice. I frowned and read. Vehicle parked on the street for over 48 hours. Violation of Article 14, Section 2. Fine, $500. I chuckled. Article 14, Section 2? I knew it by heart, because I wrote it. That rule only applied to cars abandoned for more than 7 consecutive days, not 48 hours. I drove this truck to work every single day. I looked up, and of course, Karen was standing on her porch, holding a cup of tea, watching me with a smug little smile. "Good morning, Jake," she said sweetly, her tone dripping with triumph. "Looks like you broke the rule." I smiled back. "Really? Funny, I thought I wrote that rule." She froze for half a second, then shrugged. "Well, rules are rules. Doesn't matter who wrote them, you still have to follow them." I nodded, hiding my grin. "Fair enough. I'll look into it, Karen." That evening, I grabbed my laptop and opened the PDF, HOA Guidelines, Maple Grove Estates, version 2.0, the very one I had drafted 2 years earlier. I scrolled to Article 14, Section 2. No vehicle may be left parked on the street for more than 7 consecutive days without movement. I printed the page, highlighted the line, and placed it next to the violation notice. Then I composed an email to the HOA board, which I was no longer part of. Subject: regarding $500 fine, Article 14, Section 2. Dear board members, I received a violation notice signed by Mrs. Karen Thompson, head of the Oversight Committee. As the original author of our community rules, I can confirm that Article 14, Section 2 applies only to vehicles left stationary for over 7 days. My truck is driven daily. Please confirm the basis for this fine. Sincerely, Jake Miller. An hour later, I got a short reply. Thank you, Jake. We'll review this and respond within 48 hours. I smiled and closed my laptop. I knew the current HOA board was basically run by Karen. The others hardly ever argued, she was too assertive. But I had one advantage, I understood the rules, and more importantly, I wrote them. 3 days later, Karen knocked on my door. She was wearing a white blazer and carrying a thick folder. I opened the door, forcing a polite smile. "Jake," she began, with a tone halfway between friendly and threatening, "you shouldn't challenge the system. We have the right to interpret or adjust the rules when necessary." I leaned casually against the doorframe. "Do you now? But any amendment requires a community vote, doesn't it? Article 3, Section 1? Her face lost color. Clearly, she didn't expect me to remember it that well. You're just trying to argue technicalities," she stammered. "No," I said evenly. "I'm just quoting the law. The one I wrote." She clenched her folder and stormed off without another word. But I knew this wasn't over. And I was right. The next week, I received 2 more violation notices, this time for improper trash bin placement and grass height exceeding 7.5 centimeters. That's when I realized something important. Karen didn't care about fairness, she cared about power. And I, Jake Miller, the man who wrote the HOA rules, decided it was time to teach her a lesson, with her own rulebook. After receiving 2 more ridiculous fines, I started to realize something. For Karen, rules weren't tools for order, they were weapons for control. For me, they were meant to protect fairness. And nothing pissed me off more than watching someone abuse what I'd built to keep things fair. That night, I made myself a cup of black coffee, opened my laptop, and began flipping through the HOA rulebook I had written years ago. I remembered every line, every comma, because I had spent an entire summer crafting that document. I jotted down a few key points. Article 3, Section 1, any amendment to the rules must be approved by at least 2/3 of homeowners. Article 9, Section 2, HOA board members may not issue or sign violation notices if they are the complainant. Article 12, Section 4, any violation must include photographic evidence with a clear date and timestamp. I smirked. If Karen wanted to play by the rules, then fine, I'd play by them too. The difference was, I knew them better than she ever could. The next morning, I went for a walk around the neighborhood. Phone in hand, camera rolling. I wasn't out for revenge, at least that's what I told myself, but Karen had turned me into the HOA's accidental lawyer. Within 15 minutes, I'd found plenty. Karen's hanging flower pots extended more than 8 inches beyond her balcony railing, violating Article 5, Section 2. Her trash bin was still sitting at the curb well past noon, though regulations required all bins to be stored by 10 a.m. And best of all, she was keeping 3 cats, even though the rules explicitly limited homeowners to 2 pets per household. I snapped pictures of each violation, complete with timestamps. That afternoon, I sent a polite, professional email to the entire HOA board, with Karen copied in, of course. Subject, Report of Possible Violations, 123, Maple Grove, property of Mrs. Karen Thompson. Dear board members, please find attached photographic evidence of potential rule violations at the above address. Trash bins left curbside beyond the allowed time. Balcony flower pots extending past the safety limit. Ownership of 3 cats exceeding the maximum of 2 pets. As per Article 12, Section 4, all evidence includes timestamps. Best regards. Jake Miller. I hit send, leaned back, and took a sip of coffee. An hour later, my phone buzzed. It was Rick, the current HOA president. Jake, he said, half laughing, half shocked. Did you really just report Karen? I'm just following the rules, I replied. Article 12, Section 4, Rules are rules. Rick chuckled. You won't believe it, Karen already called me, screaming that you're out for revenge. I'm not, I said calmly. I'm just helping the board enforce the rules fairly. Isn't that the HOA's job? Rick was silent for a moment, then let out a laugh. Jake, I always knew the day you left the board, we'd lose our only logical guy. I'll look into it. 2 days later, Karen showed up at my doorstep again. This time, no fake smile, no tea, no notepad. She was genuinely furious. What are you doing, Jake? You reported me, she shouted. I stayed calm. Just helping the HOA enforce the rules, Karen. You know, same as you did with me. You know I'm on the board, she snapped. I do, I said, smiling slightly. And per Article 9, Section 2, that means you can't process your own violations. Rick will have to handle your case. Her eyes widened. You can't do this. I'm not doing anything, I said softly. The rules are. Karen stared at me, speechless, her face pale. Then she turned sharply and stormed off again. The next day, the whole neighborhood was buzzing. Rumors spread fast. Karen Thompson had been reported for violating her own HOA rules. People whispered as she walked by. Some even emailed me, thanking me for teaching her a well-deserved lesson. But I wasn't done. I knew Karen wouldn't take this lying down. If she wasn't stopped properly, she'd keep going. So, I prepared my next move, a community petition. According to HOA regulations, if more than 25% of residents signed a petition, a special meeting could be called to review or remove a board member. I drafted a simple document, title in bold. Petition to review the conduct and authority of Mrs. Karen Thompson, HOA committee member. I printed 30 copies and started knocking on doors. To my surprise, most people signed immediately. Everyone had their own Karen story, how she'd taken photos of their trash bins, lectured them about weeds, or even yelled at kids for kicking a ball near her fence. Within 2 days, I had over 70% of residents' signatures. When I handed the petition to Rick, he just laughed and shook his head. "Jake, I think you're about to make Maple Grove history." I smiled. "No, Rick. I just want the neighborhood back, the quiet, fair, pre-Karen version." The day of the special HOA meeting came faster than I expected. That evening, the community hall at Maple Grove was packed. Bright lights, a full house, and a thick tension in the air. I arrived early, carrying a folder stuffed with documents, copies of the HOA guidelines, photographic evidence, and the petitions signed by more than 70% of the residents demanding a review of Karen Thompson's position. The room felt heavy. Some whispered quietly, others stared straight ahead pretending to be neutral. Everyone knew what this meeting was about, but no one had ever seen anyone dare confront Karen so openly. Rick, the current HOA president, sat at the head of the long table, tapping his pen on the surface to call the room to order. "All right, everyone," he began. "Thank you for coming. Tonight, by request of more than 25% of the residents, we're holding this special meeting to review the conduct and authority of Mrs. Karen Thompson as a member of the board." Karen sat directly across from me, her face stiff and unreadable. She wore her signature black blazer and pearl necklace, a uniform of authority she never failed to display. Rick continued, "First, I'd like to invite Jake Miller, the petitioner, to present his case." I stood up, adjusted my papers, and began calmly. "Thank you, Rick, and thank you all for coming. I didn't come here to stir up trouble. I came here because the HOA is supposed to protect our collective interests, not serve anyone's ego." I placed a copy of the HOA rulebook on the table. 3 years ago, when I served as HOA president, I wrote this rulebook. It was approved by 87% of our community. Its purpose was to keep Maple Grove tidy and friendly. But lately, several rules have been misapplied, or worse, twisted, to punish people unfairly. I glanced at Karen. She remained silent, though her jaw tightened. For example, I continued, Article 14, Section 2 clearly states that a vehicle can only be fined if it's left unmoved for over 7 days. Yet I was fined after just 48 hours. That's not rule enforcement, that's abuse. The room murmured. I clicked to project photos on the screen. Next, here are photos of violations committed by Mrs. Thompson herself, trash bins left out past the allowed time, balcony planters exceeding the safety limit, and ownership of 3 cats when only 2 pets are permitted. The murmurs grew louder. Karen's face flushed red. "Those were minor mistakes. I didn't mean." Rick raised a hand. "Please, Mrs. Thompson, let him finish." I nodded politely. Of course. Mistakes happen. But when the person enforcing the rules excuses herself and punishes others, that's not a mistake. That's abuse of power. Silence filled the room. I could feel the shift. People were no longer afraid to look directly at Karen. Rick stood, holding up the petition I'd collected. "We have signatures from 71% of residents requesting this review. Under Article 3, Section 1, we're authorized to hold an immediate vote." Karen shot up from her seat. "This is slander. He's manipulating all of you with lies." I met her gaze calmly. "If I'm lying, I'll move out of this neighborhood myself. But if I'm telling the truth, I ask that you do the same." Karen froze, eyes darting around the room. No one came to her defense. Rick sighed. All right then. All in favor of removing Mrs. Karen Thompson from the HOA board, please raise your hands. I turned to see the crowd. 1 hand. Then 2. Then 5, then nearly the entire room. Rick counted slowly, nodding. 43 votes in favor, 3 opposed. As per the bylaws, Mrs. Karen Thompson is hereby removed from the HOA board, effective immediately. A round of applause followed, not loud, but sincere. I looked at Karen. She seemed smaller now, defeated, her eyes glistening with angry tears. I'll sue all of you, she shouted before storming out of the room. Rick shook his head. Jake, you think she'll actually do it? I smiled faintly. She can try. But if she does, she'll have to read the entire rulebook first. The meeting ended with a sense of relief. Several neighbors came up to shake my hand. You did the right thing, Jake, said Mr. Peterson, who lived at the corner. We've all had enough of her. Thanks, I replied. I just want things back to normal. Rick patted my shoulder. I'm thinking of nominating you back to the board. We need someone who actually understands the rules. I laughed. I think I've done my part. All I want now is to water my lawn and grill steaks without being photographed. Rick laughed too. Fair enough. But I was naive to think it was over. 3 days later, I received an envelope from the County Court of Oak Ridge, a lawsuit notice. Karen had officially filed a suit against the HOA, claiming unlawful dismissal and defamation. I stared at the envelope for a long moment, then chuckled quietly. Karen really had no idea who she was up against. Because in a courtroom, truth is proven by documents. And no one had better documentation than the guy who wrote the laws. I pulled out my phone and called Rick. What's up? He asked. Karen's suing, I said. Looks like it's time to bring the rulebook to court. Rick burst out laughing. Jake, I almost feel bad for her. I sipped my coffee, gazing out the window. Don't. I don't want revenge, I just want her to understand. Rules aren't made to threaten people, but to protect everyone. 3 weeks after that fateful HOA meeting, I found myself at the Oak Ridge County Courthouse, where Karen officially sued the Maple Grove HOA for unlawful removal and defamation of character. The lawsuit itself was absurd, but rules are rules, and I, more than anyone, knew them inside and out. Karen entered the courtroom in a sleek gray suit, hair neatly tied up, clutching a thick leather briefcase like a weapon. Beside her stood a young attorney who already looked nervous. I sat with Rick and 2 other HOA members, carrying only a worn leather folder, the HOA Guidelines version 2.0, the one I had written myself. Judge Carter, a man in his 60s, adjusted his glasses and scanned the files before him. All right, Mrs. Thompson, you're the plaintiff. Please state your case. Karen stood, her voice trembling slightly but trying to sound authoritative. Your Honor, I was a member of the Maple Grove HOA board. I was unlawfully removed during an illegitimate meeting with no proper notice, and my reputation was damaged publicly by Mr. Jake Miller, who twisted facts to turn the community against me. I was merely enforcing the rules. The judge nodded and jotted something down. Thank you. For the defense? Rick stood up. Your Honor, I'm the current HOA president. This is Mr. Jake Miller, the resident who initiated the petition. The judge looked at me. Mr. Miller, I'm told you were the original author of the HOA rulebook? I am, Your Honor, I replied calmly. I wrote and ratified the current version in 2022, and I've brought the original copy, including all amendments approved by homeowner vote. The judge motioned toward the bailiff. Let me see it. I handed over the document. Page after page bore signatures and approval records, every amendment documented in order. Karen's expression faltered slightly. Her lawyer stood, trying to sound confident. Your Honor, the meeting in which my client was removed was not announced 14 days in advance, as required. Therefore, the decision is invalid. I smiled faintly. Permission to respond, Your Honor. The judge nodded. Go ahead. Article 7, Section 3 of the HOA Guidelines states, in cases where more than 25% of residents request an emergency meeting, notice may be given within 48 hours. Attached here are the petition documents, signed by 71% of Maple Grove residents. Thus, the meeting was entirely lawful. Rick handed the judge the signed petition as evidence. Karen's lawyer frowned. But surely, such a vote could have been influenced by Mr. Miller. The judge cut him off. Do you have any evidence of coercion or manipulation? Silence. The lawyer sank back into his seat. Karen glared at me, eyes burning. You're just trying to humiliate me because I fined you $500. I met her gaze and replied evenly, No, Your Honor. I simply wanted to restore transparency to my neighborhood. I didn't retaliate, I followed the rules. The very ones I wrote. Judge Carter looked at me for a moment, intrigued. And the clause Mrs. Thompson cited when she fined you, do you recall it? Yes, Your Honor. Article 14, Section 2. I opened the rule book and read aloud. No vehicle may be left parked on the street for more than 7 consecutive days without movement. Mrs. Thompson fined me after only 48 hours, I continued, and I have proof that I drove that vehicle daily. I placed on the table doorbell camera footage showing timestamps of me leaving and returning home each day. The courtroom went silent. Karen's composure cracked. He's just trying to make me look bad. I was trying to keep order while everyone else was lazy. Judge Carter tapped his gavel. Mrs. Thompson, please control yourself. The hearing dragged on for nearly 2 hours. I presented each clause clearly, cited each amendment, and countered every argument Karen's lawyer made. It wasn't about clever debating, it was about knowing every line of the rulebook by heart, because I was the one who wrote it. Finally, Judge Carter cleared his throat and delivered his verdict. I've reviewed the evidence and documentation. The board's decision to remove Mrs. Thompson was fully compliant with the HOA's bylaws. There is no evidence of defamation by Mr. Miller or the board. On the contrary, it appears Mrs. Thompson misapplied the rules and exceeded her authority. Therefore, the plaintiff's case is dismissed. Karen's eyes widened. No! This can't be. I just wanted. The judge spoke firmly. Mrs. Thompson, I suggest you reread your community's rulebook before attempting to enforce it again. Court is adjourned. The gavel struck. As people began to leave, Rick leaned over and whispered, Jake, you just gave this courtroom a masterclass on using law to defeat arrogance. I smiled. I just told the truth. A good rule doesn't need protection, it protects itself, if it's written right. Across the room, Karen sat slumped in her chair, pale and silent. Her lawyer murmured something to her, but she didn't respond. For a brief moment, I felt almost sorry for her, not because she lost, but because she would never understand that justice isn't about power, it's about integrity. Outside, the crisp autumn wind brushed my face as I stepped into the open air. Rick walked beside me. So what now? He asked. I'm going home, I said, smiling. I'm going to grill some steak and cut my grass, and hopefully never see another violation notice again. Rick laughed. You've earned it, man. I looked back at the courthouse, where Karen still hadn't come out. I just hope, I said quietly, that she learns one thing: no one stands above the rules, not even those who think they control them. A week after the trial, Maple Grove felt strangely quiet. No more warning slips taped to doors. No more Karen lecturing neighbors about trash cans or grass height. The air felt lighter, people actually smiled when they passed each other on the street. Life went back to normal for me: work, watering the lawn, weekend barbecues. Only one thing had changed: people now waved first when they saw me. Sometimes I'd hear a few jokes. Careful, Jake, if you write another rulebook, we'll all have to memorize it. I'd laugh and reply, no need, as long as everyone understands the spirit of the rules. Rick stopped by occasionally, sitting with me on the porch, beer in hand. "Can you believe she actually moved out?" he said one evening. I turned to him. "Karen's gone?" "Yeah," Rick nodded. "Sold her house last week. A young couple just moved in, really nice people. They asked who you were, since everyone keeps mentioning your name." I chuckled. "Tell them I'm the guy who once got fined $500 for parking in front of his own house." We both burst out laughing. I thought the story was over until one Friday afternoon. When I got home from work, there was a small white envelope in my mailbox. Not a fine, not a flyer, a handwritten letter. In familiar slanted handwriting, "Karen Thompson." I sat on my porch and opened it. Inside were just a few short lines. "Jake, I don't know if you'll read this, but I want to say I'm sorry. My pride got the best of me, and I forgot why I joined the HOA in the first place, to help the community, not to control it. I was humiliated, but thanks to you, I finally understand. I hope you and Maple Grove stay peaceful. Karen." I read it twice. There was no anger in it, no excuses, just a simple, genuine apology. I folded the letter back into the envelope and looked out at the quiet street. The evening light painted the maple trees gold. I smiled. A few months later, Rick invited me to the HOA's year-end meeting. "We made a few small revisions," he said. "You should come see, it's still based on your original version." I agreed. That night, the meeting felt different. People were friendly, laughing, talking about real improvements, organizing a Christmas party, planting flowers in the park, helping new families settle in. No arguments, no fines. When it ended, a young homeowner approached me and asked, "Hey Jake, I heard you wrote the old rulebook. Any advice for us?" I thought for a moment, then said, "Yeah. Rules shouldn't make people afraid, they should make people understand and respect each other. If you can do that, you won't need to fine anyone." He smiled, nodding thoughtfully. By the following spring, Maple Grove had changed so much it was almost unrecognizable. Kids ran across the park, families held weekend BBQs together, and as Rick joked, the HOA had saved money on paper for violation notices. I just laughed, watching the smoke from the grill rise into the bright evening sky. Sometimes, though, I still thought about Karen. I didn't hate her, not anymore. In fact, I was grateful. Because of her, I'd learned something deeper about what I created. A rulebook, no matter how perfect, means nothing if the people enforcing it lack a fair heart. And maybe that's what Maple Grove had finally learned from one ridiculous $500 fine war. That night, I took Karen's letter out again and read it on the porch. Then I pinned it to the wall beside a framed copy of Article 1 from the HOA rulebook. The purpose of this community is to create a harmonious environment where everyone is respected and responsible for one another. I whispered to myself. That's all we ever needed, not winners or losers, just people who live right. The night breeze rustled through the trees, carrying the distant laughter of children. I set my beer down, leaned back in my chair, and smiled, this time, truly at peace. My story, the HOA Karen tried to fine me $500 but didn't know I wrote the rules, was never really about victory. It was about fairness and humility. Karen was wrong, but through her mistakes, the whole neighborhood learned that rules aren't weapons, they're the threads that hold a community together. And if you ever find yourself in a similar situation, someone using the rules against you, remember this. Knowledge is power, but kindness is the real win.